January 5th,
1942. Two German officers stride down the stone corridors of Colditz Castle, the most escape-proof prison in all of Nazi Germany. Guard dogs patrol the grounds, searchlights sweep every angle. Armed sentries line the parapets. A full battalion stands watch. One soldier for every 2 prisoners. Goering himself declared this fortress unbreakable. But something about these 2 officers is off. Their buttons, crude lead castings poured from stolen plumbing over candle flames. The holster, sliced from linoleum floor tile. The belt, painted cardboard. One close look destroys everything. And right now, a German sergeant sits 10 feet ahead beneath electric light. One of these men is British Lieutenant Airy Neve. 6 months earlier, he attempted this identical escape. The scenery paint on his cap glowed vivid green under the searchlights. The guards didn't fire. They laughed. Tonight, every single element has been reconstructed from nothing. But here is what nobody anticipates. The man the Third Reich, caged behind these walls, will one day walk into Nuremberg and compel those same commanders to read the charges against their own empire. What pushed him to attempt the same suicidal gambit twice? And what did that first disastrous failure teach him? May 1940, northern France. German panzer divisions have torn through Allied lines and are racing toward the English Channel. In the port city of Calais, a thin British rearguard battles to slow the advance, buying precious hours for the evacuation at Dunkirk, 26 miles northeast. Lieutenant Airy Neve, 24 years old, fresh from a law degree at Oxford, commands a patchwork troop from the 1st Searchlight Regiment, Royal Artillery. Men he himself described as an ill-assorted, randomly equipped unit, separated from their original positions and armed with whatever they could scrage. He is no career soldier. He is a lawyer, handed a rifle, and told to hold a port city against panzers. Their mission is not victory. Their mission is to make the Germans bleed for every block, every alley, every bridge on the road to the harbour, so that 300,000 men can board boats at Dunkirk. Nobody in Calais expects to return home. They are purchasing time with their own lives so the British Army survives to fight another day. Without Calais holding, the Dunkirk evacuation collapses. Neve understands this. Every man here understands this. They fight to make their deaths count for something. Artillery barrages shake the medieval walls of the old town. Tracer fire stitches the air red. Smoke chokes the sky a filthy orange above the port. Streets choked with abandoned vehicles, shattered glass, and men who stopped moving hours ago. Neve leads his troops across an open square toward the docks. A shell detonates nearby. White-hot shrapnel tears through his right thigh. He drops into burning rubble, drags himself upright, keeps moving on one functioning leg. His orders are simple. Hold the line, whatever the cost. Around him, men fall and do not rise again. The Germans are not slowing. Every minute Neve's rearguard survives is another minute for the boats at Dunkirk. Every man here knows the arithmetic. On May 23, 1940, a German officer finds Neve crawling through wreckage, uniform shredded, legs soaked dark with blood. The fight for Calais is finished. Neve is hauled upright. He is 24 years old, wounded, and now a prisoner of war. From this moment forward, his sole mission is to reverse that status. Transport trucks carry him east into Germany. He passes through Offlag 9A/H near Spangenberg Castle, where he spends months studying the fences, memorizing sentry rotations. In February 1941, he transfers to Stalag 20A near Thorn in occupied western Poland. At each camp, Neve paces the perimeter, catalogues weaknesses. Captivity is a sentence he refuses to serve. In April 1941, he and a fellow officer named Norman Forbes slip out of Thorn under darkness, heading east towards Soviet-controlled territory. They push through moonless Polish forests for days, sleeping in ditches, navigating by memory and stolen compass. Then, near a rail junction at Elk, dawn catches them in open ground. Nowhere to run, no ditch deep enough, no tree line close enough. A Gestapo car skids to a halt on the road ahead. Two officers step out with rifles leveled. Neve raises his hands. He has marched for days through frozen woodland, slept in roadside ditches, eaten next to nothing. And it dies here. A country road, 30 seconds of bad light, days of progress obliterated in a heartbeat. That second failure cements his classification. The Germans stamp Neve a persistent escaper, an ostracizer, and ship him to the single facility designed to hold men exactly like him. In May 1941, his boots strike the cobblestones of Colditz Castle's inner courtyard. The cliff plunges 75 meters to the river below. Sentries salute. Prisoners watch from barred windows. The walls run 2 meters thick. Every prior escape attempt from this fortress has ended in failure. Colditz has contained French generals, Polish colonels, British commando officers, men possessing every motive and every skill to run. Not one has made it home. The system is convinced it has him sealed away permanently. But how do you cage a man who reads every locked door as a riddle and every failed attempt as data? What happens when the Reich's most dangerous escape artists occupy the same building and begin exchanging tradecraft? Inside Colditz, the world contracts to stone corridors, barred windows, and that endless plunge to the river. Winter air slices through the cells like a razor. Searchlights carve the darkness every few seconds, dragging white bands across the ceiling. Guard dogs pull at chains in the corner yards. More than 500 officers, British, French, Polish, Dutch, Belgian, share cramped sleeping quarters on hard bunks under relentless surveillance. A full German battalion guards the castle, roughly 1 soldier for every 2 prisoners. There are no work details, no labor assignments, no way to fill the hours with purpose. Stone walls, head counts 4 times daily, and the knowledge that the cliff beyond the window drops 75 meters to frozen water. The monotony is engineered. Boredom, cold, overcrowding. The Germans deploy them as effectively as barbed wire. But the Germans have committed a catastrophic miscalculation. By concentrating every escape artist inside one castle, they have constructed an academy of defiance. French officers, who tunneled out of Bavarian camps, trade intelligence with Polish soldiers who forged documents in Silesia. Dutch prisoners conduct German accent coaching sessions in their cells. An escape committee, a dozen determined faces huddled beneath blankets by candlelight, convenes after every roll call. They coordinate plans so one group's attempt does not compromise another's cover. They assign escape officers who track every active scheme, allocate scarce materials like dye and wire, enforce a queue so the castle does not erupt in simultaneous chaos. Neve, intense and quiet, sits among them. Colditz is meant to crush these men. Instead, it is forging them into a collective intelligence network more sophisticated than any individual escape plan. Neve's own scheme crystallizes that summer. The British prisoners stage theatrical performances in a small hall inside the castle. Concerts, plays, variety shows that German officers attend from the front rows. Beneath the theatre's wooden stage, Neve and his team have identified a route. A trapdoor descends to a storeroom. That storeroom connects through a ceiling passage above the guardhouse to the German side of the castle. The plan exploits a psychological blind spot. Sentries scan for prisoners scaling walls, cutting wire, tunneling beneath floors. Nobody watches for officers strolling calmly out through German quarters. On the night of August 28, 1941, Neve dons his disguise, a Polish greatcoat dyed field grey, a black officer's cap coated in scenery paint, a cardboard belt painted silver, and marches toward the guardhouse with two others. A spotlight blazes white. A guard shouts, quote, "0." In the flood of the searchlight, the paint on Neve's cap fluoresces a vivid, unmistakable green. Not dark, not dull, bright, radioactive green, visible from 30 meters. The guards freeze, then burst out laughing. Paul PM, the German security officer, strolls over, inspects the glowing cap with theatrical amusement, and delivers his verdict. Corporal Neve is to be dispatched to the Russian front. 6 months of planning, every stolen material and rehearsed step undone by a tin of cheap paint nobody thought to test under a searchlight. Mocking salutes trail Neve down the corridor to solitary confinement. In that cell, silence crushes inward from every surface. The humiliation burns worse than any formal punishment. The concept was right. Walk out disguised as a German officer, exploit the one direction sentries never scrutinize. But the execution was amateur. Cheap paint that crumbled under strong light. Untested materials. A timeline so rushed it left zero margin for failure. Neve sits on the narrow bunk, turns the handcuffs around his wrists, and arrives at a cold decision. The strategy survives. Every physical component gets rebuilt from nothing, stress-tested under conditions identical to the real escape, and perfected before he stakes his life on that same corridor again. If Colditz Castle was engineered to crush defiance, it chose the wrong prisoner. He has no materials, no outside contact, no guarantee the next attempt won't collapse the same way. But perfecting a disguise capable of fooling trained soldiers under electric light, that's one problem. Finding a partner who speaks native quality German without a shred of British accent is a completely different problem. Where inside this stone cage does Neve locate someone skilled enough and reckless enough to walk back through that corridor beside him? And when he does, what will it cost them both to get it right this time? Winter, 1941. Months drag past. Neve watches everything. During meals, he maps guard rotations. At roll calls, he times each sentry's patrol down to the second. He memorizes faces, rank insignia, personal habits. Which guard lights a cigarette at the same corner every night? Which sergeant hangs back at the gate when rain falls? Which shift change runs 3 minutes behind on Sundays? He commits nothing to paper. A single scrap discovered during a search destroys everything. Every observation feeds directly into memory, catalogued, cross-referenced against every other detail. A bored guard, a careless search, a predictable shift change. Each gap becomes a weapon filed away for later. His partner surfaces from the Dutch contingent, Lieutenant Airy Neve, calm, sharp-eyed, an officer who speaks German without a whisper of foreign accent. Not textbook German, not cautious German, native German, the kind that never pauses before a word, never softens a consonant, never carries the faint melody of another language beneath it. Neve has spent weeks testing candidates, holding quiet conversations in corners of the yard, listening for the split-second hesitation that would get them both killed at the first checkpoint. Lieutenant has none. Neve brings the stubborn audacity. Lieutenant brings the linguistic precision. Together, they form a unit designed to exploit the single flaw Neve identified back in August, the assumption that no prisoner would walk out through the German side of the castle dressed as one of their own. They discard every remnant of the first attempt. Nothing gets improvised. A Dutch overcoat is stripped, re-dyed, and tailored to the exact shade of Wehrmacht Feldgrau. Scraps of lead plumbing are pried from castle walls, melted over smuggled candle stubs, poured into hand-carved button molds. Neve blows on each cooling button until it matches the weight and sheen of genuine German brass. Linoleum, ripped from dormitory floors, is boiled, shaped, and rubbed until it passes for a leather holster. A belt is constructed from cardboard, painted, and buffed until it gleams like regulation issue. Every component is tested by candlelight, then tested again under a hoarded electric torch. They work through blind hours past dawn, rebuilding the same disguise that failed. Except this time, each piece can survive a second glance. If this story of nerve and craftsmanship is holding your attention, consider subscribing. Most viewers watching right now haven't yet. One tap helps stories like these reach more people. The escape route gets refined too. Beneath the theater stage, they've cut a trapdoor leading down into a storeroom. From there, a corridor runs directly above the German guardhouse and opens onto the officers' courtyard on the Nazi side of the castle. The plan's audacity is its own camouflage. Sentries watch for prisoners scaling walls, cutting wire, tunneling beneath floors. Nobody watches for two German officers strolling out the front gate. Beyond the castle walls, a Dutch prisoner captured near the Swiss border town of Singen has shared critical intelligence, Gestapo checkpoint patterns, crossing points. This man walked the exact roads Neve and Lieutenant will follow. He knows which platforms run permanent identity checks and which only screen travelers on market days. He knows the 2-kilometer stretch of border wire near Singen where the gap between patrols runs longest. He was caught, but on a different road, making a different mistake. Neve and Lieutenant commit every detail to memory. Train schedules, border patrol timings, the names of towns where document checks hit hardest. The date is fixed, January 5th, 1942. That evening, British prisoners mount a theatrical performance. German officers occupy the front rows. A single drowsy guard watches the gate. Backstage, hidden in the darkness above the stage, 4 men wait. Neve and Lieutenant, alongside one British and one Dutch officer. Uniforms pressed, forged papers tucked into breast pockets, lead buttons catching the faintest trace of light. The final act ends. Applause crashes through the hall. Somewhere below, a guard yawns. 5 months of obsessive preparation now compress into the next 90 seconds. 5 months of studying guard rotations, testing button molds by candlelight, drilling German phrases until they roll off the tongue without thought. One flawed button ends it. One guard who looks too long ends it. One card player, stepping into the hallway for a cigarette at the wrong second, ends it. And there is a variable Neve cannot control. The trapdoor passes directly above a room where German soldiers play cards deep into the night. If even one of them wanders into that corridor, 4 men in counterfeit uniforms standing where no prisoner should exist. And if the disguise holds, what waits on the other side of the wire? Applause still echoes through the theatre as the final curtain drops. German officers in the front rows clap with polite indifference. The last stagehands clear the stage. Above, in darkness, 4 men crouch over the trapdoor. Neve pulls the rope. The hatch swings wide. They drop into the storeroom below. A plank groans under the impact. But the sound dissolves beneath applause, still rumbling through the floorboards. Light bleeds from the hallway beyond. They flatten against the wall. Listen. Nothing. They push through a metal door and step into the corridor above the guardhouse. The German side of Colditz Castle, where no prisoner has any business breathing. Neve straightens his Feldgrau coat. Lutein adjusts an officer's cap. They exchange the parole word in whispered German, a phrase they overheard a guard use 3 weeks prior. Below, a sergeant sits hunched over reports at his desk. 2 officers descend the staircase. He glances up, nods without interest, returns to his paperwork. They cross to a small door and step into the outer courtyard. Cold air floods their lungs. A lone sentry stands at ease beneath the stone archway, separating the castle from the outside world. Neve's pulse pounds against his throat. They carry themselves like officers returning from late duty, unhurried, shoulders squared, boots striking flagstones in measured rhythm. The sentry's eyes track them. He hesitates. 1 second, 2. Then they pass beneath the arch, through the gate, walking the one direction no escaper in Colditz history has ever gone. Straight out the front door of the German command block. Bitter wind slams their faces. They drop into the dry moat, scramble across, and scale the outer wall into Colditz Park. Moonlit trees swallow them whole. They tear off German caps and coats, stuff them beneath brush, revealing civilian clothes layered underneath. Worn jackets, shabby hats. The disguise of Westphalian factory workers. Luton grins in the darkness. They have walked out of the most secure prison in the Third Reich in under 5 minutes. They split up to halve the risk. Neve boards a freight train at Litzmannstadt before dawn. A German newspaper spread open across his lap as camouflage. A regional train carries him south. Every station platform is a dice roll. A suspicious conductor, an alert policeman, a checkpoint he never anticipated. He finally changes trains for Singen, the last German town before the Swiss frontier. Outside Singen, he reconnects with Lutein near a forest road. 2 Hitler Youth boys with rifles slung over their shoulders challenge every man on the path. They inform Neve and Lutein They are hunting 2 escaped prisoners of war reported in the district. Neve presents his forged papers with deliberately trembling hands. A jittery factory hand from Cologne. Nothing else. The soldiers examine the papers. One lowers his weapon. The other waves them through with a shrug. The 2 men they're searching for stand 5 feet away and walk past unchallenged. By midnight, they reach the border fence. Snow blankets the earth, ghostly under a sliver of moon. They drag themselves through snarled barbed wire in darkness so cold it burns. Coats catching on rusted spikes. Fingers dead, clawing uphill towards Swiss soil. Temperature plunging far below zero. Every inch of altitude earned through agony. Neve's hands split open against frozen metal. Then, flat ground. A signpost materializes in the dark, Swiss lettering. They stagger into the village of Ramsen, hearts slamming so loud the sound seems to echo off every silent wall. A Swiss border guard sits on a nearby bench, cigarette glowing in the frigid air. Neve steadies himself, crosses on trembling legs, and slaps the startled man on the shoulder, speaking halting Swiss German. 84 hours since that trapdoor swung open beneath the theatre stage at Colditz. Airy Neve becomes the first British officer to escape Colditz Castle. A brutal journey follows, through France, over the Pyrenees, via Gibraltar, until he sets foot in England and receives the Military Cross. But Colditz was never the destination. It was the forge. What do you give a man who memorized every corridor of an unbreakable castle, then strolled through it, dressed in the enemy's uniform? And what happens when the Reich that once caged him finally crumbles, and someone must walk into the wreckage to confront the architects? MI. 9 recruits Neve immediately. This clandestine branch operates escape networks across occupied Europe. The Polaire line through